Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 30th Paparelli Zoom Chat for Entrepreneurs. We are all about entrepreneurs helping entrepreneurs. I thank you all for coming and setting this time aside for our community. In the last Zoom chat, we discussed the education system as a planning constraint for businesses with my friend Kareem Abul Naga. I learned that in the midst of market uncertainty, of which he's up there in New York, is that he said that your plan needs to get even simpler. It must depend on what's certain. So the least common denominator. And there were many other insights from this conversation with Kareem. He was real popular and very clear. He was a very good, accomplished speaker and knew his market well. So if you want to know anything about schools, that's the place to go. So please subscribe to my YouTube channel at zoom.paparelli.com. And then you can view the Zoom chat, share it with a friend, and can get your own insights from the discussion. I'm also starting to post these Zoom chats to a Paparelli podcast channel, so it's easier to actually listen to these rather than having to listen to it in front of your computer or via YouTube. You know, every week there's a lot of great ideas that come that are shared on this Zoom chat, and that's why we need you to be here each week. Together, we are in fact stronger. And John, would you tell us about the chat feature?
Yeah, hey, I'm John Marshall and appreciate you, Charlie. Let me help you. As Charlie's interviewing, if you have a question, please use the chat and leave the question to me directly or to the group. And if it's pertaining to the conversation at that moment, then I will interrupt Charlie and ask the question. If not, I'll text you directly and say, hey, listen, man, can you ask that question in the Q&A section, which Charlie will start exactly at 9:45, and we'll have 15 minutes for Q&A. So thank you, Charlie.
All right. Well, thanks for handling that, John. I appreciate your help with this. It makes it a lot easier and more effective. So the entrepreneur's thought of the day from the Bible on today's topic is this is right after Adam and Eve ate the apple. Then the Lord said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" That's from Genesis 3:13. And my application of that, God saying, "What is this you have done?" is markets or people, if you will, never behave the way you expect them to behave. They don't always do what they should do or what makes good sense. So I lead a Bible study on Thursdays for entrepreneurs from 12 to 1. If you'd like to attend, just send me an email and I will put you on the list. But let's get started. Getting product market fit is the first and hardest assignment for every entrepreneur. When I started in angel investing, I had a rule. The startup must identify a market where people are already buying the product that they're intending to sell. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to take product market fit off the table because, man, you could spend a lot of time in that area. There are two types of new products introductions. One is new products that are introduced to new markets. All right. That would be sort of a Facebook kind of a thing. So this whole idea of social networking, okay, new products and new markets. And then the second one, which is new products for existing or mature markets. And product market fit for mature markets is crazy hard. I was reading the Wall Street Journal on Monday, and what caught my eye on section B, at the back of section B, there's this article, which was really interesting. It said, the headline was, "Tech Tempers Dream for Autos." So the first sentence captured the difficulty of product market fit for mature markets. Technology, and then it went on, the first sentence of the first paragraph said, technology companies were going to revolutionize the car market. Then reality happened. With all the technology and all the money in the world, the car market, this is for technology companies, the car market has baffled these tech companies. So they're now backing off. Even Apple just did a 200-person layoff from their new car product idea that they've been working on, their secret project. So today we're talking to an entrepreneur who took on this challenge of introducing a new product to a mature market. She started a company to sell called Acivilate to sell into the incarceration market of state governments. This is a mature market with embedded products and embedded processes. My friend Louise started her company Acivilate from an idea born out of a family experience. She wanted to change the world for a subset of men and women caught in the system. Her aim was to give them the hope of a second chance, a new life. The only thing that stood between Louise and this new hope for this subset of people, these men and women, was state government. Louise Wasilewski is from England. She is a mechanical engineer by training, and she is an entrepreneur who takes on giants. I am amazed at her grit and her trust in God. She's an amazing woman. In the face of enormous odds, you know, Louise has, she and her team really have fought every day for the last 7 years to crack this market. So today we will hear just what she learned as she continues the fight to break through. Louise, welcome and thanks for joining me and all of us and giving your time as we work together on this mission of helping other entrepreneurs. So please unmute yourself if you would.
Thank you, Charlie. And, thanks for the opportunity. I have learned a ton from attending these calls over the last few months, especially like Faraz and then Patrick Taylor, who are really like spot on for me.
Yeah, we had some pretty good people on there, but I appreciate you showing up every week. It means a lot to me. And I know that we had this scheduled for a while back and we kind of pushed it forward a little bit. So I appreciate your flexibility too. So why don't we start, Louise, just with a little bit of your background. I think that would help. And then what I'd like you to do is kind of help us get into how did you discover this whole entrepreneuring thing?
Yeah, so I grew up in the UK, as you said. I did aerospace engineering there and did an apprenticeship with British Aerospace, building spacecraft, satellites and the Ariane launcher, that stuff. And that was really my first opportunity to work for a startup. The UK telecom industry deregulated and BAE set up a telecom subsidiary. So very small team. We were the first people to compete against BT in the UK and the first company to gain a multi-country satellite operating license that wasn't, first actual company as opposed to a government entity.
Well, how did you get to the United? I know you worked in Germany for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. So through that, I ended up working on a thing called MPEG, which now MP3 and digital video, but I worked on all of that stuff getting started, and that led me to work in Luxembourg and live in Germany. And through that committee, I met a Scientific Atlanta employee. And those of you who've been in Atlanta a long time will remember SA, and married him. And so I came to the States. It'll be 26 years ago in January.
Oh, so you met a Scientific Atlanta employee out where were you in Germany? In France?
So I was working in Luxembourg and living in a little town in Germany, but we actually met in Rome, Italy at one of the MPEG meetings.
Oh my God. Okay.
Met around the world for a week at a time for a couple of years. And
that's how you came to Atlanta.
That's how I came to Atlanta. I married a Scientific Atlanta employee.
So how do you get in, obviously you're taking more of a corporate route when you got out of school. So how do you cross that bridge to start thinking about, I'm going to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So actually the company,
a lot of people that, there's a lot of people I talk to, obviously, that have that great background. And then they're saying like, oh yeah, I want to do my own business. And they have no idea. So this would be really helpful, I think.
Yeah, I am not one of those people who said, I really want to do my own business. Both my parents ended up working for themselves, and we can get to my dad a little bit, but it was really tough because they were sole proprietors, didn't have regular income, and that's a very difficult place to live. I was very much taught, get yourself a good job, get a good education. That's your your pathway to be able to buy shoes for your kids when the school year starts.
Yeah.
And just, work hard, get a good job. And that's what I was doing.
Why did you not listen?
I listened for a long time until the point when I had to listen to God more than my parents.
Oh, okay.
And
Well, what did God tell you?
he told me to go work on this problem that I'd been thinking about for a long time. When I was a teenager, my father got a criminal conviction, and as a result of that, he lost his job, which was a regular office job, and he couldn't get hired again. I have a very strong memory of him sitting at the dining table with the newspaper, willing another job to appear in the paper because he had applied for every job in the paper, and nobody would hire him because of his criminal record. So he ended up day laboring after 6 months of trying to get a regular job, and then eventually got on a regular crew and then worked for himself.
White collar worker to being a day laborer.
Yep.
Because that's all that was available for him.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And so my family went through the social and economic consequences of justice involvement, and there are that sort of situation.
So that's stuck with you
to react differently.
That stuck with you. And when did it get to the point where you just felt like you had to actually do something about this thing that was part of your past?
Yeah, I had been pondering what I could do, and I didn't have assets, I didn't have a social network, or I wasn't high net worth, but I was at Cox, and I decided to do my MBA at Emory because I figured I'd become a startup CTO, because I'd worked at a few startups. And Charlie Getz's class, you may know Charlie. I say this is really all Charlie's.
I've never met him. People told me, you got to meet this Charlie Getz, but go ahead.
Yeah. So Charlie said new businesses start when people answer old questions in a new way. And my old question was, how could I create second chances for people like my dad and kids like me? And I was also wondering, how could you afford to run a business in software in the US, looking at the rates coming out of China and the Philippines? How could you, afford to have US programmers? Mm-hmm. And so I came up with a brilliant idea that I would start a nonprofit to train inmates to code. And then I would have the consulting company that would give them their first job when they got out, work an apprenticeship program, kind of gradually pay them more as they gained, team skills and technology skills.
So your plan, though, is to overcome the negative of the criminal record with a skill that's in very high demand.
Yes. And that I knew something about, and, I did a stint at KPMG Consulting, so I've got the consulting background. That seemed totally doable. Mm-hmm. And then I started researching the market and found the average education level of inmates in the US is 6th grade. And I realized that wasn't going to work. You don't take someone with a 6th grade education and teach them to code. I mean, it's not Fortran anymore, like when I was in college, but you still.
By the way, I took Fortran in college and I failed it the first time. And the second time I had to pass it and I wound up with a D. And here I am in the computer business. Okay. But, I don't think Fortran was easy.
No. And, CSS, and there's a lot of things that are a lot easier now, but you're still not going to get there with a 6th grade education. So instead I stopped and said, I don't actually know what this market needs. Let me go find out about it.
But that was your first time. So you said, back to Charlie Getz, who said, answer old questions in a new way. I really like that. That's the start of a business. Is you sat there and you found a problem, you went to solve it, but you didn't understand the market well enough, really. So when you discovered what the market was, you see, this isn't really going to work. So then so you still have this thing that's on you, right on your back, this monkey on your back that says, I remember my father sitting there at the dining room table with that paper, and just being so down. So what do you do next? Read,
more reading, learn what's going on in this market. Who are the players? What's going on? And it was
Was your research all around trying to figure out what's happening to these people with criminal records as they're getting out of jail or being paroled?
So I was trying to understand the whole ecosystem. That was who I wanted to help. In
Right.
social impact terms, that individual would be considered my beneficiary in my business model.
Uh-huh.
And I knew I didn't want to charge them because those folks don't have money and it just ends up being a tax on their family. But I knew, having created categories before, that I had to understand the ecosystem, who did what to whom, when, why. And it was a seminal moment for me when I took a day off work when I should have been at a cable industry conference to go to a criminal justice conference. That was, when I'm using my vacation time, not just my after hours, but my vacation time to go and start making connections and showing up as a professional in that space during the workday, and not just as a, volunteer or advocate in the evening.
That's interesting. So you're trying, that must have been enlightening going into that conference, because that's, instead of the cable conference, I'm sure the people that attend that, what was it, a criminal justice conference?
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole different crowd, for somebody who's so technologically based as yourself, with great expertise and probably at that time in the cable industry. So at that conference, you go there thinking, all right, I want to help these people. So you're trying to still get to what's the problem that I'm going to solve, so what kind of eyes did you bring into that conference? What did you bring away from it?
What I brought into it was assuming that I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
Listening to everything. I mean, I got the vocabulary. I'd done enough reading to have the vocabulary. And I came away from it with a judge and a professor from John Marshall School of Law. Where's John?
I didn't know John had his own School of Law.
John Marshall School of Law, yeah. That said, we think you're on the right track. We want to stay in touch. By the time I went to that conference, I had the core of the problem and an idea of how to solve it. And I drew a cartoon to express for myself what I thought needed to be done. And I took that cartoon with me and I showed it to people and said, here's what I'm thinking. And these two folks, one, who was a judge and another was a professor in the law field, said, you're on the right track here. And I'm now in a book club with that professor.
That's fantastic.
We have stayed in touch, and she's been an ACLU board member here in Georgia, and she's just given me great advice along the way.
One thing that's difficult, and this is, again, as I think about entrepreneurs, this is something that happened to me when I was thinking about getting into venture capital and angel investing. I went to a venture capital conference that was out in San Francisco, and my name on this list of 250 people attending, my name was at the top because I was the only one who didn't have a business, and everything was, and the list was sorted, the attendee list was sorted by business name, right? And it was very unsettling for me to go in without an identity into a conference, into this new market. How did you represent yourself that day?
That's a good question. And in my space, there are a lot of people who are advocates. They want to do something. And so it was easy to show up as an advocate. Mm-hmm. And that's so vague. That wasn't a problem. Well, in my space, the problem is actually that advocate isn't very vague.
I see. Okay.
And I'm very thankful to Peter Roberts at Emory, who runs their social enterprise program. He told me one day that I had to choose between being an advocate and an insider.
I see.
And as an advocate, you can talk about what you want to change, but you are not trusted by the corrections system because they are afraid that if they let you in and you see something bad happen, bad things happen in prison, that you will get them in trouble. And so I made a switch. When Peter told me that, I thought, goodness me, I need to stop and think about this. And I took inventory, would I make it as an advocate? Could I make it as an insider? Yeah. And it was very clear that I needed to take the insider play. And so we've leaned hard into compliance in the business. The events that we've gone to, we stopped doing social media because That's
So
an
what is the
advocacy.
problem that you finally you settled on that you're going to solve? That was the beginning of Acivilate. And I'd really be interested in how you came up with that name, by the way, because I trip over it all the time.
Yeah, people stumble over it terribly. And so the product name is Pocket with 2 Ks, and we got the service mark for that. It came from software for a civil society.
Okay.
And it's a play on Assimilate. And we tried 249 other domain names before we found one that was available, and it was that bad. I counted them. We sat there in that Rio Grande restaurant one day and just came up with names after names after names after names. And we've had 249 names we thought were better before we found one we could actually get.
Got it. So what was the problem that you were actually aiming to solve then? That was the kickoff of the company.
Yeah, the problem is that different government agencies and nonprofits can't work together because privacy rules get in the way. And when they can't work together, the person who needs support is actually being pulled apart by those different players rather than being built up.
And the net result of that is?
So an expression that's used is people fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
But when you think about it in monetary terms, it means somebody gets the same service over and over again. They end up homeless more than once because they didn't have stable employment. They end up losing a job because they didn't have a way to get to work on time or stable housing. They end up violating one of their conditions of supervision because they didn't have the right mental health care. You know, we talked this morning about how important your emotional stability is. It's important for learning, but it's also important for just getting your life together and making good decisions under stress.
So how do you, so your idea here what the states were doing in the incarceration area when these inmates were let go, or released from prison, wasn't working. Okay, so you're coming up with a better way, right? This new way that's going to give them, that will work and will hit on all of the things that were not working so that they could get this second chance. So how do you start with, you talked about Pocket. You're not a programmer, you're a business person, right? So how do you get to that? How do you get to that sort of product development piece?
Yeah, I went through Flashpoint at Georgia Tech with Merrick.
Okay.
And so Flashpoint allowed me to flesh out a lot of the details and understand a lot of what the product needed to do. And it helped me finally find somebody who was willing to pay. And at that point, I had been...
What do you mean you found somebody who was willing to pay?
So when I discovered this problem and stumbled on a way to fix it, you know, from a technical and regulatory point of view, the question was, yes. And I had somebody say, if you build that, it will solve our problems. But who was ever going to pay to fix this problem? I found nonprofits didn't want to pay because
these are the lost people, right? I mean, it's
they can't pay for themselves.
They made their bed, they need to lay in it, right? I mean, it's just the consequences of their actions kind of a thing. Is that true?
I wouldn't say it's so much that, but I would say that the corrections industry is, and when I say industry, I'm including the states in that, they're very focused on people and staffing levels and things like that. And they're in silos. When you look at a corporation, if you realize that spending more on marketing would, increase your sales, or, improving your supply chain will improve your margins, you have a CEO who can make those different departments work together for the good of the company, right? In state government, there is really nobody other than the governor to tell the Commissioner for Human Services to go work with the Commissioner for Corrections.
Oh.
And that wouldn't solve the problem that a lot of service delivery is through the counties. The counties don't listen to what the state says unless there's money involved. So it's a very complex ecosystem.
Whoa.
So I'm a rocket scientist,
So
right?
you could fall, it's so it's easy to fall in between the cracks of the silos, right?
Yeah.
So you can walk among them and they'll all talk to you, but you never really get it. You never really get to a deal. But so you got the product started to get built because of Flashpoint. You found developers?
Actually, at the end of Flashpoint, an old friend from Scientific Atlanta, somebody I'd worked with there. So not only did I marry an SAA employee, I ended up working there. We'd been having lunch every few months. He had started the last company that I worked with, Daryl DeFries. And he said, you need some help. And he'd been retired from NT Broadband for a while. You know, they sold that to Tandberg. And he wanted to do something interesting. So he said, I'll come and help you for a bit. And he's still here. He's
So
my CTO.
he's the one that wrote the initial product.
Actually, we wrote a check. We found a contractor, and we wrote checks, and we hired a full stack developer, and we got a product going.
So one of the things is that you were new to this industry. Okay, so here you are. You're new to an industry. You're passionate about it because of your personal experience. You're not going to give up on it. You really have to solve this because you've been carrying with it literally all your adult life. Well, who are the first people to join a company like this, and where do you find them?
The first people to join are people who can see your mission and are interested enough in the mission to spend enough time working out whether what you're doing might work, and do they believe in you. And I would say that in our case, we had people who joined our mission who didn't join the company. The biggest challenge for us was getting the first order, because government can almost never be first. And so we ended up working with the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office and a professor at Kennesaw, and we got a GRA grant that paid for the professor to do research on that first deployment with Gwinnett.
Oh, okay.
And so that got us our first, government user in Gwinnett County Sheriff's Office, and they later became a payer. But that partnership is still in place, and there are others within this local community, and we are trying to build our careers together, right?
So once you start running in that circle, if you will, with that network, then people are drawn to you because of your vision and the problem that you're solving, right? And that was the first key recruits, if you will, that became part of your team, and they're probably still with you. I would think a lot of them, and if they never really joined the team, they're probably still in touch with you.
They are doing their piece. They are in their silo, but we are working together. That the deputy at Gwinnett, it was his birthday yesterday, and I texted him and said, hey, Jacob, happy birthday. We've really built that ecosystem here locally.
Okay. And of course, they become the hands and feet and the mouth kind of going out and evangelizing this thing too, and making introductions for you. But it sounds like, you and Daryl, I guess, was that his name, Daryl? Mm-hmm. Wrote some checks here trying to get this thing funded. I mean, to keep this thing alive, to get the product made and all that. Eventually, you had to raise money. And I remember back those days, when you started early, when you made your first pitch, for Flashpoint and all that, you're raising money against people that are in commercial markets. And here you are in state government, right? Which is like anybody who's been doing funding, they always say, oh, state government, that's the kind of reaction you get. So how did you get past that and actually, just give us a quick view on what happened with the fundraising?
Yeah, it was not a pleasant experience. And everybody said, selling to government, it'll take you too long. But I got some great advice from Kelly Gay, who's the immediate past chairman of Venture Atlanta. Yeah. Somebody had told me Kelly would give me good advice, and I pursued her for 2 years before I got her onto our board. That she said to me, go and pitch to someone who won't invest when you've developed your new pitch, but who will give you good feedback so that you can fix your pitch to take it to somebody who is likely to invest. Okay. And so I reached out to Paul Eifeldano and said, Paul, will you hear my pitch? And Paul had told me a year before that they liked what we were doing, but they wouldn't invest because we were selling to government. So he had told me no. But he gave me the time because he was, contributing to the community. And I'm sitting there at the end, and he'd moved to BIP. He'd been at the Accelerant before, and he'd moved to BIP. And I'm sitting there at the end of my pitch, and I've got my pen, and I'm ready to write down all the stuff that's wrong. And he said, you know, you've really got something here. I had moved the business far enough in a year, and my understanding and expressing of it, that they turned around and decided to write a term sheet. And I think that reflects tremendously well on
you overcame their quick objection of state government as a market by actually creating something of what appeared to be of good value.
That's right. And, you know, it should reflect really well on Paul, first, that he was willing to, you know, give a listen to me when he told me no before, and, you know, their capacity to, you know, to look and understand and see and overcome bias or prejudice.
I had an experience with you that I've seen, I saw you sort of making these pitches, and I remember, and they were, I would call it, when it started, it was like the first time I heard you pitch was really at Flashpoint, you know, at their graduation. And, you know, those are really polished and they're very short. What are they, 3-minute deals or 5-minute
Yeah,
deals?
4 minutes and you're done. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I remember they're sort of awkward, right? Then I watched you pitch, and you kind of got better and better, and then I kind of lost track. Then I came into a BIP, Buckhead Investment Park, and a pitch that brought a bunch of people together in a room at ATDC, and you gave the presentation. There was like 2 women, in fact, they were entrepreneurs. You were one of the others, and you pitched, and it's like it went from this awkward to you owned the room. You got so good at laying out what you do and why you do it and how it works and what the value is. It was just about, how long did it take you to get to that level of comfort to be in front of people like professional investors who don't know the market, you know, to kind of bring them in and make them want to join you?
I would say by that measure, 3 years.
Gee.
You know, one of the challenges
How many pitches were you doing a month in over 3 years?
I wasn't doing that many a month because there are very few people who are going to be interested in what we're doing.
I see. Okay.
So I had less chance to practice than if I was doing fintech with, you know, a gazillion fintech investors out there. And, you know, there's no question that our journey has been a slow journey. And so you need to pick the right investors who are going to be along for the journey, right? If you get somebody who's used to flipping in 18 months, that's not going to work.
How do you get to the right investors with somebody like state governments as your market, or incarceration and, you know, parolees? You know, how do you find those people? I mean, you asked me I think you did ask me, well, who are they? I said, look, I don't have a clue. Yeah.
So there is an emerging space called GovTech, and we're on the GovTech 100 list for 2020 and 2019.
Okay.
But mostly it's a PE space, and you know, there are a few big players that gobble everybody up. So it's a tough space to get early stage investment. There's no question.
The other side, I guess, is that when you're that narrow, then it's actually easier to find, because, I mean, you can qualify people very quickly. Are you in it or not in it, right? Versus, you know, oh, anything commercial, I'll invest in. You hear people say, you're like, I'll invest in SaaS. Well, that goes from pillar to post, right? We hear you saying, okay, I'm SaaS, but I'm in state government. Boom, they hit the door, you know, except for the 3 guys that just stay there, right?
Yeah, the thing that's been a little bit different from that has been this growing interest, you know, since Michael Brown and Ferguson, in doing something about our criminal justice system. And so there's a group of investors called social impact investors that are trying to use their capital to change our world for good. So really, social impact investors were a better place for me in many ways than the corrections industry, because the corrections folks, it's pretty much all PE, and they just want to buy you for $2.5 million, or, you know,
they're doing roll-ups. Yeah, they're trying to make it more efficient.
Yeah, so I know those guys. You know, we talk periodically when we're ready
Then-
to make an exit. We've got the right relationship.
So let's
But
move on to, getting in the marketplace. So what are the things that tell me about your first deal and how things have gone since then as you're trying to break through, if you will.
yeah. So the first deal really was that opportunity with Gwinnett, where GRA funded, Georgia Research Alliance funded a grant to Kennesaw State to do the research.
Uh-huh.
We didn't get any revenue out of that, but we got a deployment with a government agency, and we also got our CGIS network agreement, which is just a regulatory thing. And from that, I presented at a conference. A customer prospect called 2 weeks later, State of Utah Department of Corrections, and said, I saw you present 2 weeks ago, I want to buy. And I said, well, that's good, but can I make sure that you actually want what we've got? And he said, you can give me a demo if you want, but I've seen enough. This doesn't ever happen. So we gave him the demo, and I asked him what's missing, and he said, you've got enough. And so we did the deal. It was a little bit of procurement aggravation, but we were truly the only thing in the market like this. So they were able to get it through as a sole source. And we learned a lot
This
from that
was your
deployment.
early adopter state. And
That
this
was.
individual was your champion, right? Who was
And-
willing to fight through the system.
Yep.
to get the-
And he's now the deputy commissioner.
Okay.
And then from that, we were able to get a National Institute for Justice grant for a clinical trial, a true randomized controlled trial. So if anybody here's on the pharma side, we have a control group and a treatment group, and we got a contract with North Carolina, and then we were able to win that NIJ grant for an RCT.
Mm-hmm.
And
So it looks like, okay, so I've got my early adopter client, right? And now I'm going to start installing. So there's this time to install the product and to get it in and to start working. So you do in fact have a reference. How did it go from there?
yeah,
I'm sure you're saying like, we're ready to go. This is going to be great, right?
it was a year before we got the next contract, which was North Carolina.
Wow.
And
Why a year?
everybody wanted to see how Utah got on.
Mm.
But there's another problem in our market, which is states typically need 3 reference accounts before they can go ahead and buy. A lot of the procurement rules are looking for 3 references. So we had to get to those 3 to kind of break through.
So you had to find 2 other early adopters in effect, right? Like the Utah.
Out of 50 states.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And you did.
So we got North Carolina, and we've got a contract with Louisiana. But we also learned a lot of other tricks around government contracting in terms of, there are these master service agreements that you can get on. So we learned a lot of tricks to help move things forward, but it's just been brutally hard.
But those master service agreements, tell us just briefly about that, because those are, big corporations have those for like a lot of vendors, it just takes a long time to get on those things. But you don't, your startup, you don't have a long time.
We had somebody who wanted to buy, who said the easiest way for me to buy is to have you on this contract. And he told the reseller, put them on the contract. And the agreement with the reseller allows a state to say, do this. And so they did that. And then the buyer was fired for procurement irregularities. So the person who got us on the contract ended up not buying because he was obliged to resign. So that
Because
was
of what he did for you, or because of
No.
other things that he had done? Okay.
No, other things. We were not caught up in that mess.
Okay.
But we'd done all the work to get to the sale, to get to yes. We're going through the procurement. We issued the quote, and then the guy gets kicked out.
Jeez.
And that's like, what could I do?
Yeah.
What can I do?
So what happened? So it seems like you got your 3 early adopters, your references. It would appear to me that things should just go swimmingly from here. What happened?
COVID hit.
COVID. Okay.
COVID hit. And so what happens is prisons shut down. What we're doing is we're bridging the gap between the prison and the community and community partners. And normally they would go into the prisons to meet people before those people are released. All of that stopped. And so we thought, this is great. It should create opportunity for us to get them to take their in-person operations and make them virtual. We enable the virtualization and remote working in this space. We meet all the regulatory requirements. This should be great. We did all the work that Faraz did to be ready for a huge influx of clients. And instead they just hunkered down and we're in a, oh my goodness, you know, we've got 15% of our staff out of every shift because of COVID, where they're just not,
So
they're
the
under such
priorities change
stress.
dramatically. You know, it's interesting that you should say this is going to be great for us, because I have never seen a downturn or a recession, for example, where the entrepreneur didn't say, this is going to be great for us. I love entrepreneurs that they always see that there's going to be this opportunity in this mayhem, right? And but dealing with state governments, they really did just withdraw, is what you're saying.
So the hits to the budget were just terrifying, right? Hits to state revenues. You know, some states saw revenue drops 24%, and so they just started cutting absolutely everything and not
What
doing
happens
anything.
to you then?
We sit there and go, oh dear, what can we do to last this out?
Then you had something else hit you too.
Yeah.
Right. This George Floyd situation and this social justice movement and BLM. How did that impact you?
Yes. So the black, actually I had two things hit me, Charlie, because my father passed away back in the UK and I couldn't go and see him. And obviously he's been, you know, my sort of inspiration. And then Black Lives Matter.
Oh.
And so we're very much in the business of trying to fix those disparities and make it easier for disadvantaged communities to, you know, to find a way out of their situation. And it drew a lot of hard lines. It distracted a lot of attention. And it really politicized something that before had been very much, you know, bipartisan, right? Criminal justice reform, the kind of stuff we're enabling, had been very bipartisan. And this just put a lot of politics in the way. And it drew a lot of attention away from other things that we could be doing. And again, we thought, look, we've got a way to help, right? We are empowering people to take responsibility for their own lives. We're doing things that will reduce recidivism. This should help. But it takes a while before that desire translates into rules or into purchase actions.
I got it. So here you are, you haven't quite had that sort of breakthrough where they're all sort of buying. What have you learned from trying to crack this market, a new product in a mature market? You know, what lessons do you pull away, and when do you think that breakthrough will happen?
Well, we're sitting here with 3 states saying they might still buy before the end of the year. So the quality of the conversations has changed, and one of the things that has changed is we're actually looking at a different business model with a different payer. And that payer is Medicaid. And you're like, Medicaid? Why? What? So it turns out that these folks that we're talking about are really expensive from a healthcare perspective because they, you know, don't look after their health. They have poor social determinants. And so if we are able to improve that information sharing and put the right team around somebody, they will be less likely to get admitted to the emergency department, you know, to have a diabetic incident, to have a behavioral health incident. Those folks are costing like $110,000 a year. And
So you're actually taking that same group, but you're getting more specific in the problem that you solve within that group. Maybe you were a little too broad to start out with, and now you're getting, okay. The other thing you're telling me is follow the money.
Absolutely. And there's an awful lot money on the health, a lot more money on the healthcare side than there is on the corrections side. So we're partnering with a healthcare company.
We don't want to help them, but we don't want them to die.
No, it's I could be more cynical than that. We don't want to help them, but we don't want to pay for expensive healthcare even more.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right. So if we can help control the healthcare costs by coordinating better care and providing a coach and making sure they've got stable housing, stable food, you know, stable income, and help with the psychological transition of going from incarceration to the community, they will be more stable and they will cost the state less. On the healthcare side, we'll still get the savings on the correction side. Corrections becomes the junior partner to the healthcare side.
I like that. So it's really, with government, it's really about, it's about the money and who pays, right, for this problem that needs to be solved. But listen, the last question, and I'm running a little late here, but this last question I have. So tell me, this has been a 7-year battle, okay, in trying to get into this market to solve this problem that has, that of you watching your father with that newspaper. In the midst of this, your father has passed away. And when, you know, and we saw you through that and prayed for you through that. And it was very difficult because you couldn't go there, you couldn't see and support your mom even. But this hasn't left you. This is still with you, that you have to solve this for these people so that they don't have that same situation as your father. So what do you, how do you, when you look forward, how do you continue? What's your next step here?
You know, we had a point a while ago when it looked like we would close the company. And that really gets back to your earlier question of identity, right? Showing up, you know, what you asked me, how do you show up without a company? But I realized that my commitment is more to the mission than to the company. And I don't mean I'm not committed to the company. I mean, we sold the cabin to fund the business. I became a US citizen. I'm incredibly committed, but that's different from my identity. And so even if Acivilate were to stop or we sell it, there are other ways I could pursue this mission, whether through a public policy pathway, working for one of the big companies. I can still be on my mission doing what God has called me to do without having to be the CEO. I'm not one of the folks who grew up saying I'm always going to run my own company. But I did this because I could see nobody else was going to do it.
So you had to run your own company because
nobody
no one
else
else was
do it.
actually doing it. And it was what God called you to do, is to serve these people on this mission.
Yeah.
That's you're just incredible, Louise, just incredible. We love you and we really admire you. I know I do, okay, for all that you've done and all that you continue to do. And I know that you're not going to show up somewhere and all of a sudden be the social media expert or, you know, be in the food business or something. This is what you do. And so our prayers are with you. And I love your trust in God and the way that you kind of move along with him one step at a time, knowing that he called you to this and he's going to clear the way and take care of it. So thank you so much for investing.
You've just put yourself on mute, Charlie.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I said, thank you so much for, did most of that come through, what I said?
It's all good. Thank you.
Okay, good. Yeah, I just really appreciate you. So thanks for investing, taking this time to share your story. I know some of it's difficult with our community of entrepreneurs, but I think you've helped a lot of entrepreneurs today. And this is going to go out on Friday to a much larger group. And my takeaway from this is, you know, there's a couple. One is, you know, just that grit that you have comes from that kind of commitment. As an angel investor, I know you're looking for the real why somebody starts a business, because you don't want the business to end because they just get tired of doing it. It's too hard. It's like you said, I can't not do this. I have to do this. And that's the kind of investor, that's the kind of entrepreneur investors really want to invest in. Okay. The second thing is when you're cracking these markets is to follow the money and get down to that specific problem. We tend that we're going to be a little bit too broad, you know, at first. So those are my takeaways. And I know you probably have takeaways too, you know, share them with me. I do a summary that I send out on Friday morning. I'll give you credit for your takeaways on this, your insights. But my weekly reminder to you is, you know, watch your cash. It goes out fast and comes in slow. I want you to learn fast, decide fast, and go fast, but stay narrow. Next week's Zoom chat is going for entrepreneurs is going to be, and my guest is going to be a fellow named Jack. Before we get to Christmas, it'll be the last one. Jack Griffin, who's the founder and CEO of Food Finder. He's cutting the mold of Kareem from last week, and that Jack is a very young man. He's 24 years old, and for the last 7 years have been working on Food Finder, and he took it from a startup, nonprofit startup idea to actually reaching sustainability. It's an amazing story. You're not going to want to miss this. How to serve people well while becoming sustainable at the same time. So please share this weekly Zoom chat with your peers. Help me grow this community, if you will. Sign in early, catch up with people as we did today. We got on 15 minutes early. It's always good to see all my friends. And remember, I'm praying for you. Thanks for attending. This is the end of this portion of the formal interview. I'll turn it over to John now for your questions.
Great. Thank you very much. That was great, Louise. Louise, Richard Brock has a quick question. Richard?
Yeah, Louise, do you know about Televerde and the Televerde Foundation?
So that's a call center company with Televerde. Yes, I talked to them a few years ago.
Yeah, well, they are, I can make some introductions there for you, but they employ ladies in prison. I just got a resume yesterday of a woman I'm going to hire that used to be in prison for 7 years, and they taught her how to be an incredible call center agent, and I'm probably going to hire her, done it several people. But I just think that they've got tremendous traction. They're worldwide now. If you don't know the right people, I'll introduce you to them because you're so compatible. What they do is they employ these women. They change your self-respect because their motto is you shouldn't be burdened by the rest of your life by something stupid you do in the worst day of your life. So they're about second chances. So if you want that introduction, anybody on the call, Televerde is a wonderful company and many high technology, leading technology companies, SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, all use Televerde ladies, and you can't do any better. I worked with them for a year. Actually, I went to prison 3 times. A lot of people just call and says, finally, he got thrown in prison.
I welcome the introduction. Thank you.
I would do that. Reach out to me. I gave you a phone number. I'll make the right introductions for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Yvonne has a question. Yvonne, please.
Thank you so much, Louise. Thank you for sharing your entrepreneurial journey, and I enjoyed it. I would like for you to just give a couple of words or a statement to all the women entrepreneurs who will listen to this or read Charlie's post, because I think you could give us a special message, and we need to bring in more women. And I think you would be great to do that. So if you could just give us a couple of words or something that you'd like to say to women entrepreneurs.
It's easy to be underestimated, but show up with your facts. I had somebody say, that man with you looks like he could manage a budget. I'd run a $25 million budget. I'd had projects come in within 0.1%. So, stand on your facts would be one thing. Don't waste your time trying to convince people who clearly are not open-minded. Move on to the next person. And if they're in your way, you've just got to find somebody else, change your customer, and keep at it. I think women are great team leaders because we really care about our people. We are great money managers because women usually manage the money in the household. And I think we're used to some decent level of pain, and we can get through a lot more than people give us credit for.
Thank you. Facts are our friends.
Facts absolutely are our friends.
I love it, Yvonne.
Great question. Thank you, Louise. Dave Klepp, please go ahead and ask your question.
And Louise, thank you for your passion to serve the unserved. And sorry you lost your dad. I have similar experience, a long journey, and I'm curious, how do you stay motivated despite all the setbacks over a long time frame? Any insight there?
Well, there are some obvious things like exercise and sunshine that help stave off depression. But for me, really, prayer has been a huge thing. I do a Monday morning prayer call with my best friend on this every week for, 5 years, unless one of us is traveling. And really, it's been encouragement from the market. I had somebody come up to me once who had spoken to me for 5 minutes and said, thank you for what you're doing. God told me to thank you for what you're doing. And this was somebody I didn't know. First time we showed up with a booth at a conference. Those kinds of moments tell you you're on the right track. Returning citizens who heard what I was doing and wouldn't leave me alone. They were on my speed dial that say, we need to do this, that have carried the word out there for me. So, knowing why you're in it, practicing good, self-management and prayer.
Yeah.
That's great. All right. Thanks. Thanks for the question, Dave.
Yeah.
Rusty Gordon,
Hey.
please.
Thanks, John. Louise, thanks for sharing your story. It's very motivating. You're a true entrepreneur. Hang in there. There is a light, even if you can't see it at the end of the tunnel, there is one. Okay. I have a quick do you know question, and then one that speaks more to the business. The do you know, are you familiar with NAFCare in Birmingham and Jim McLean?
I am familiar with NAFCare. NAFCare found us.
Okay. If I can be helpful, just let me know. Okay.
We are hopeful that we have something going there. But thank you. That could be very helpful, Rusty.
Okay, Jim's a friend and a big Auburn supporter. So, okay. When you look back, what's the one thing you wish you had done differently? And when you look forward, what do you think at this moment in time is your biggest challenge?
Looking forward, it's still being a small company in a space that's dominated by the big players. It is easy for a buyer to take an inferior product through an easier procurement pathway.
Correct.
So I think that's the greatest challenge. And as for done differently, there are always things you could have done differently. The thing I would probably most change is it would be to Yvonne's point, it would be that much easier to be a male in this market, but I can't change that. Should I have switched to the healthcare space earlier? Maybe, but my heart wasn't in that. We also discovered there's a huge need in foster care, but foster care would not have got me out of bed every day for 7 years in the same way that working with the criminal justice market has got me out of bed every day. So, there are plenty of things we could have spent more money on marketing and less money on software, but it's not clear that more money on marketing would make anybody move any faster.
No way.
Right? A lot of our space is just about sticking around long enough that people believe you are going to stick around long enough. And there's no way you can change sticking around long enough other than sticking around. You can't make it happen faster. We hired somebody from the industry as our first hire. We did a lot of things that you can do to overcome whatever disadvantages that we had. I'm very thankful for the help from ATDC. From Flashpoint, we've had a lot of people help us along the way. Very thankful to Kelly, to Paul. I think we've listened to advice.
What a great summary that you gave there about the infrastructure or the community that we have for startups here in the Atlanta area. To plug into that was very important for you. So that's really great.
That made all the difference. I couldn't have learned how to be an entrepreneur, having been a corporate person.
Okay.
Without, people around.
Thank you, Louise. Bradley Thomas, time for one last question. Bradley, go ahead, please.
Yes, Louise, thank you for everything you've shared with us. What is some of the best literature that you've been able to read about the subject matter of incarceration?
Okay, the seminal book is The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. It's very footnoted, but if you haven't read it, you cannot imagine what a screwed up world our criminal justice system is until you read that book. And she's an attorney. That's that sort of monotonic transform you never come back from. But there's another one that actually our Keyman insurance agent recommended. Oh my goodness me. And it's about the convict lease system, Slavery by Another Name. And it's set in, a lot of it is in Alabama, but it, flows through into Georgia, and it talks about how probation and parole really have a history of perpetuating slavery after slavery was abolished in the Southeast. Read the first 3 chapters and the last 3 chapters if you don't have time to read the whole thing.
All right, we got it.
Thank you, Louise.
John?
Go, Charlie, please.
All right, I'll take it from here then. Thank you all. Louise, you're a star, man. You're a star and a good friend, and we love you.
Just glory to God, Charlie, because
Yes, my friend. So thanks to all of you for attending. I look forward to seeing you on December 16th, a week from today. It's going to be a lot of fun, but this will be the last Zoom call for 2020. So be sure to put it on your calendar. Remember, it's zoom.paparelli.com. You all have a good day. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy days to give back to our communities. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you, Charlie.